Jonathan Hare there from ABC News Verify. And a joint German and French defence plan worth $170 billion looks close to collapse. The Future Combat Air System was supposed to show how European governments can work together in defence, but it looks increasingly like national interests will come first. Deutsche Welle correspondent Arthur Sullivan joins us now from Berlin. Arthur, g'day. So what exactly is Future Air Combat System and why is it reportedly on the brink?
Yeah, so this FCAS, as it's sometimes referred to, Future Combat Air System, it's still only an idea, but the idea is that European nations, in this case France, Germany and Spain, would work together on a common air defence system and, most importantly, on a state-of-the-art so-called sixth-generation fighter jet. That's the big element of this plan. And that idea is that the fighter jet would become the backbone of European defence. It would become the preferred choice of the continent's militaries. Now, the idea is 10 years old. It was first launched back in 2017 by Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, and the then German Chancellor, Angela Merkel. However, since that time, and particularly in the last couple of years, it's really been beset by an industrial dispute between the two main companies, France's Dassault and Airbus, the German wing of Airbus. And now there is speculation that either the project will be radically restructured or shelved entirely. Now, the original plan was for this fighter jet, which would also work in coordination with drones, combat cloud technology and various weapons, an entire air defence system. And the French company Dassault was primarily tasked with working on the jet, with Airbus working on the other elements. But the two companies have been repeatedly clashing over the jet itself, over its development, over exactly what it would do and over who would control it. And now this industrial dispute is becoming, in a way, a political one. Just this week, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz strongly hinted that the project would have to be shelved, and he specifically referenced the fact that France wants to build a nuclear-capable aircraft that Germany doesn't. But all in all, it's not a good look for a continent that is talking about solidarity and working together at the moment in the face of various challenges and threats.
Yeah, and so in general, how well are European governments working together on the topic of defence? And this is particularly interesting in light of Donald Trump's vocal criticisms.
Yeah, and interestingly, this week here at DW, we did speak to one of the main figures in the story. That's the CEO of Airbus Defence, Mike Schulhorn, and he did emphasise to us that in many areas the FCAS project is working together, is working quite well, but just not on the biggest part, which is the fighter jet plans. He talked, for example, about the Eurofighter. That's an existing fighter jet programme that does involve 4 different European nations, and that does work well. And there are other examples of successful defence collaboration. But on the whole, there is this consistent and very justified criticism of European governments that they're not aligned well enough on defence. And that means that they don't use money efficiently, and they also don't necessarily build the best systems. So to give you a very quick example, when it comes to procurement in the defence sector, a lot of governments and companies are still thinking in terms of their own national industries. And it means that when it comes to certain military applications, equipment or models, there could be 5 or 6 or 7 from Europe and just 1 from the US. So it means that there's far more costs on the European side and a lot less efficiency. And that's why the potential failure of FCAS here matters. It's more fragmentation and, again, that lack of a common purpose.
And what about levels of spending on defence?
Well, the thing is, there is no question that the bigger picture here is that it is a completely transformed picture for Europe when it comes to spending on defence in Europe. For decades, European countries dragged their heels on defence spending. The NATO target was 2% of GDP, and most of them didn't even reach that for a long time, including Germany. Donald Trump, among many others, heavily criticised that. And part of the reason for that lack of spending was this so-called peace dividend during the 1990s, the 2000s, the 2010s. A lot of these governments were happy to not spend on defence if they could get away with it and use that money for social spending and other things. But we know that those days are over. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, European governments have had to spend more. The NATO target has moved from 2% to soon be 5%, with 3.5% of that on core military expenditure. That's a huge jump. And it does look like most European NATO members will meet that by the time it comes into effect in 2035. But finally, there is this nagging concern that a lot of the money that's been spent at the moment is actually not being spent on the right things, that still too much of it has been spent on traditional military equipment like tanks and so on, but not enough has been spent on the kind of innovative technology, drone technology, AI-enabled tech and so on, that could perhaps boost the economy in the longer term. So room for improvement, but the fact is that Europe is now talking about what it's spending on defence rather than the fact that it's spending at all all. So that at least is an improvement and a sign of progress.
Okay, Arthur Sullivan there in Berlin. US actor Eric Dane, who starred